Hey y'all, this is Jeremy from Production Den. Welcome to the channel. I'm so glad that you're with me today. Today we're going to be talking about mixing vocals. And today I'm going to specifically focus on EQing vocals. So mixing vocals is a multi-stage process, and I'm going to be covering the first stage of EQ that I do for almost every vocal that I'm working on. So let's jump into it. All right, so I am working on this project and I have gotten most everything mixed as far as the instruments go, and now I'm starting to work on vocals. And this is a song that I previously worked on, and so to make it a little bit easier to focus on, you can see that I have actually muted out all of the other background vocals, so the only vocal that you're going to hear is the actual lead vocal. And in the mixer, I've actually taken all of the effects off of the vocal itself, so the only thing that's in there right now is a parametric EQ, which is what we're going to be using today to alter the sound and hopefully clean it up a little bit. So the first thing that I did was come out to the project or the playlist window and make sure that the gains in between these clips, so for verse 1, chorus, verse 2, chorus, and the bridge, all had a basic equal level. And then using the channel rack, I went into the audio section and just made sure that each of those vocals were routed to the same channel. So you'll see that they're all routed to channel 18 in the mixer. So now I can do all my processing for all those vocal clips on just one channel. So in channel 18, the first thing that I'm putting on here is a parametric EQ. So let's hear a little bit of the song right now without any effects on it whatsoever. It's just the music and the vocal that's untreated. And this is just a little section of the chorus. All right, so you'll see that it's the blank vocal, no effects, nothing's on it. I'm gonna come in here and open up this EQ, and then I'm gonna simplify my view a little bit, make sure that we're just focusing on the vocals. To get this parametric EQ to stay this way, I actually chose the option from the drop-down menu that says detached. And what that does is allow you, as you're switching between windows, that you still maintain this EQ that sits in front of everything. And the reason that I'm doing that is just so that you can see exactly what I'm doing for the whole time. So you'll see that there are 7 bands that are available here. Typically the first thing that I start to do is to do a roll off. So I create a high pass filter and then I start to roll off the low end of the vocals just to clean up that a little bit and make sure it's not too muddy. So you can come here to number 1 or up to here, and if you drag this or down and go until it turns into this curve, and then if you use your scroll wheel, you can adjust how steep that curve is. So I'm adjusting the steepness, and then I'll just kind of push this up. Let's just start around like 100 or 90 and see how that works. All right, so let's take it off. All right, so I'm just kind of searching around to see whereabouts it starts to lose a little bit of its power in the bottom end of it. And then I drag that back out to a point that feels comfortable where it doesn't feel like it's losing a lot of its power. So the next thing that I do on vocals is deal with the boxy section that's down around that 300 and 400 range of the vocal. So I'll typically start with this third band, and I will go down here to this knob which adjusts the width. So if I pull this up and then I adjust this knob down here, you'll see that it narrows or it widens out. And so I'll keep it fairly wide, and then I will boost it up just a little bit and then sweep around as I'm playing just to hear where it sounds the most boxy. Can't she ever escape? No one ever told her that love could truly hold her. Her heart is growing colder while her mind is feeling so far away. Did she get this way?
Can't she ever escape? No one ever told her that love could truly hold her. Heart is growing colder while her mind is straight.
I ended up sweeping around that 300 and just finding where it felt really boxy in my ears as I had it boosted up. And then I went ahead and pulled it down, and I pulled it down a little bit more than I would normally, just to hear where it starts having a really negative effect on the vocal. And then I just brought it back up a little bit. And then I used the second band, the band 2, to actually knock off a little bit more of that low end. Some people don't like to do that because they feel that there's some character down in that 90 range or 100 range. But for this particular vocal, I didn't hear that. So I'm actually just focusing on knocking out a lot of that low mid area. So the next thing that I'll do is actually go over to the high end. And for this, I'm using the built-in kind of shelf functionality here. But the thing that I'm going to do is to make sure that I am not increasing the place where you have a lot of harsh S's and T's. A lot of people will have to de-S their vocals. So the last thing that you want to do is actually go through a process and make that area more pronounced. So what I'll end up doing is just coming in here and raising up this area a little bit and then sweeping back and sweeping forward until I don't hear the S's being as harsh, but I want to give a little bit more brightness to the top end of the vocal. So here's how that works.
Did she get this way? Can't she ever escape? No one ever told her that love could truly hold her. Heart is growing colder while her.
And for me, like, I find around in that, like, somewhere between 4,000 and 6,000. So you'll see the actual numbers. If you look up at this top left while you're sweeping, it'll show you where you're at. But around that, like, 4,000 to 6,000 is usually where I hear a lot of the sibilance in my voice. And it's different for every person, so you need to figure out where it is on your voice. But I'll just sweep through that process and then give a little bit of a boost to the top end. And those are the 3 most basic changes in EQ that I usually make to my vocal. Now, depending on where I've recorded it or the setup that I had when I was recording it, there's some times where I'll need to go in and find particular frequencies that are standing out that don't sit right in my ear. And so to do those particular things, I usually use the sweep method that a lot of people talk about. So if you take, let's say we'll take this band 6, and I'll narrow that band down by just dialing that back really far, not all the way though. And then you can use that to sweep back and forth to figure out if there's maybe some particular frequencies that are just really bothersome to your ears, or they just don't sit right. And then you can just take those down a couple dB. I'm not gonna do that in this particular section right now because it's a little bit early in the process. I haven't done any sort of other compression or anything else. So I'll usually do another set of EQ after I've done compression to find those frequencies that might be standing out and being a little bit too obnoxious once I get to that point. But I just wanted to cover the basic 3 things that I always do with an EQ as I'm starting out. So I'm adjusting this low pass or high pass filter to knock off the low end. I'm adjusting down some of those low mids so I get rid of some of that boxy sound. And then I'm boosting a little bit on the high end, but I'm also making sure that I am not boosting where the S's and the T's are so that it doesn't add to that harsh sound that you hear before you've done like a de-esser. All right, so now that we've done that basic EQ, I want to kind of overemphasize it so you can hear exactly what's been happening. So I added in a Fruity Balancer plugin and just boosted the level of the vocal just a little bit overall so we can focus in on what it sounds like with the effects and then without the effects so that you can see this is not a huge change. These are pretty subtle changes, but it's once you start stacking your other processing on top of that. So once you've done EQ and then you do compression and then maybe you do some de-essing or another EQ and then some creative effects, all these things stack up, but each of these individual tweaks are not huge in and of themselves. So let's listen to it before the EQ is on there and then listen to it once the EQ is actually engaged. So this is before the EQ. Remember, this is just boosted up a little bit louder than it was before.
Did she get this way? Can't she ever escape?
Okay, and now here's with the EQ engaged.
Did she get this way? Can't she ever escape? No one ever told her that.
So you can see it's not huge, and you probably have to have a pair of headphones on or be listening into some studio monitors to be able to hear the differences between that. But all we've really done is taken out a little bit of that low end that's muffled and cleared up some of those low mids, and then added just a touch to the high end. And that is the first step. That's the first EQ that I'm usually doing on a vocal, just to start working it through the process of getting it to sound a little more professional and polished. So hopefully that was helpful for you guys to be able to see the first stage of EQ that I usually do for vocal production. Next week, I'll be walking you through the first stage of compression that I use on a vocal and showing you the settings and the tools that I use. I'm gonna be using stock plugins throughout this whole process, so hopefully that's helpful for you guys. If you have any questions or comments about what I did today, or if you have any suggestions for things that you want to learn about in the future, please let me know in the comment section below, and I will see you in the next round.